In the latter part of the 19th century, spiritualism was all the rage in the United States, echoing England's earlier fascination with the subject. Occultists such as P.B. Randolph, H.P. Blavatsky, and Emma Harding Britten famously attached themselves to this movement in order to promote their own writings. Those interested in spiritualism often encountered dynamic leaders who served as introductions to groups such as the Theosophical Society, Hermetic Society, and the Rosicrucians as part of the new occultism that emerged on both sides of the Atlantic beginning around 1880. Thus, popular interest in subjects falling under the broad term spiritualism brought members into the world of occult organizations. That spiritualism formed in the popular mind a broad and inclusive umbrella for varied spiritual practices is demonstrated by Harry Kemp's description of one of Crowley's ceremonial magic rituals as a séance, even though it had nothing to do with contacting spirits of the dead. Indeed, Crowley revived the archaic and idiosyncratic spelling of magic with a K to distinguish his teachings from sleight of hand and charlatanism, as he states in Magic in Theory and Practice. Quote, I found myself at a loss for a name to designate my work, just as H.P. Blavatsky some years earlier. Theosophy, spiritualism, occultism, mysticism, all involved undesirable connotations. I chose therefore the name magic as essentially the most sublime and actually the most discredited of all the available terms. I swore to rehabilitate magic, to identify it with my own career. End quote. Primary among those groups whose spiritualism formed part of a larger organization was the Theosophical Society, founded by Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and Colonel Henry Steele Olcott in 1875. Blavatsky's teaching that the world's religions represented a universal esoteric doctrine that is compatible with science was promulgated by her books Isis Unveiled in 1877 and The Secret Doctrine in 1888. As will be shown, Blavatsky was but one of many writers at this time positing a universalist view of religion. The Theosophical Society attracted many bright and prolific minds, including G.R.S. Mead, Isabel Cooper Oakley, Emma Harding Britten, Anna Kingsford, and William Butler Yeats. Immense popularity allowed the Theosophical Society to weather two major scandals. First, Richard Hodgson of the Society for Psychical Research declared Blavatsky's seances, in which her famous Mahatma letters were produced, to be fraudulent. His 207-page report concluded, quote, For our own part, we regard her neither as the mouthpiece of hidden seers, nor as a mere vulgar adventuress. We think that she has achieved a title to permanent remembrance as one of the most accomplished, ingenious, and interesting impostors in history. End quote. Second, it was revealed that large portions of Blavatsky's books quoted heavily without attribution from earlier works in the field, chief among them being Godfrey Higgins' Anacalypsis, which was published in 1836. Nevertheless, the faithful defended her by attributing any apparent plagiarism to her receiving her text, quote, in the astral light, end quote. Crowley regarded Blavatsky highly, attributing great significance to the fact that she founded the Theosophical Society in the same year he was born, and, quote, always held her in absolute reverence as a genuine messenger from the masters, end quote. He also met her successor, Annie Besant, while sailing from Cairo to England in 1904, but ultimately he formed a less glowing opinion of her. The wisdom revealed through the agreement of spirituality and science, promoted by Blavatsky and others, found expression in the motto of Crowley's publication The Equinox as the method of science, the aim of religion. In addition, Blavatsky's Mahatmas, the great souls or mysterious adepts who steer the spiritual evolution of mankind, paralleled the secret chiefs of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and made their way into Crowley's own magical hierarchy. The magical motto of his Scarlet Woman, Jean Robert Foster, was, in fact, taken from one of Blavatsky's Mahatmas, Hilarion. In 1919, Crowley sought the attention of the Theosophical Society by republishing Blavatsky's The Voice of the Silence as a special supplement to The Equinox. He believed that the text, quote, offers indefeasible evidence of intimate initiated knowledge, end quote, and he proposed himself as the group's successor. This effort, unsurprisingly, failed, and 6 years later he released a series of anonymous broadsheets critical of the Theosophical Society leadership under Annie Besant and Charles W. Ledbetter. Whatever his misgivings about the Theosophical Society's succession, many publications under the Theosophical Publishing Society imprint had significant impacts on the tradition that Crowley embraced. For instance, Cooper Oakley's Traces of a Hidden Tradition in Masonry and Medieval Mysticism, 1900, argued that the Masons, Templars, Grail Knights, and similar groups were manifestations of a single spiritual tradition spanning 1800 years. This work was cited by Crowley associates John Yarker, Arthur Edward Waite, and Theodore Royce. Another member of the Theosophical Society was Gnostic scholar George Robert Stowe Mead. Crowley gravitated to Gnosticism, possibly because it was a faith about which so little was known that it encouraged unrestrained speculation in much the same way that Egyptian hieroglyphics, prior to the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, prompted speculation by de Gebelin that tarot cards originated in ancient Egypt. Mead's influence is visible in Crowley's first magical text, The Sword of Song, in 1904. There, he refers to the Gnostic Codex Persianus, which consists of the Coptic Gnostic Book of You and another untitled work. In 1904, the only two translations of this codex were by Schmidt in German and Mead. During his American period from 1914 to 1919, Crowley sought out Mead's translation of the Gnostic Pistis Sophia. He subsequently included the book on his syllabus for students of Magick. One of the most important authors for the present study of the Theosophical Publishing imprint was William Wynne Westcott. Aside from being a member of the Theosophical Society's esoteric section, he was Supreme Magus of the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia, Worshipful Master of the prestigious Masonic Research Lodge Quatuor Coronati, and a member of various other Masonic rites, revivals, and spin-offs. He was also co-founder of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the secret society par excellence of the Victorian era. He was a prolific writer, and through the Theosophical Society he published works in Kabbalah, numerology, alchemy, and Rosicrucianism. He also contributed to and edited an acclaimed series of 9 monographs titled Collectiana Hermetica. This series included a translation of perennial favorite The Divine Pymander of Hermes Trismegistus. Other versions were edited by occultists including P.B. Randolph in 1871, Hargrave Jennings in 1884, and G.R.S. Mead in 1906. These publications occurred during a brief period of amity between the Golden Dawn and the Theosophical Society, the politics of which are discussed by Gilbert. Westcott's translations of the Chaldean oracles figured prominently in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and was frequently quoted by Crowley. For instance, a favorite Golden Dawn purification by incense involved reciting the 199th oracle, "And when after all the phantoms are vanished, thou shalt see that holy and formless fire, that fire which darts and flashes through the hidden depths of the universe. Hear thou the voice of the fire." References to this passage pepper Crowley's writing, including Liber Samech, in Magick and Theory and Practice, the 17th Ether of the Vision and the Voice, and an evocation of Bartzabel, the Spirit of Mars. For example, the first verse of chapter 7 of Liber Ararita reads, "Then in the might of the lion did I formulate unto myself that holy and formless fire Kadosh, which darteth and flasheth through the depths of the universe." A similar paraphrase in verse 17 of Liber Tzadi Velhamas Hermeticus, quote, "Many have arisen, being foolish. They have said, stoop not down into the darkly splendid world, and be wedded to that blind creature of the slime." This references verse 145 of the Chaldean Oracles, quote, "Stoop not down into the darkly splendid world, wherein continually lieth a faithless depth, and Hades wrapped in clouds, delighting in unintelligible images, precipitous, winding, a black ever-rolling abyss, ever espousing a body unluminous, formless, and void." End quote. In addition to Westcott's contributions, 4 of Collectanea Hermetica's titles were written by Florence Farr, Praemonstrix of the Golden Dawn's Isis Uranius Lodge in London. A comment from Arthur Edward Waite inadvertently led Crowley himself to the Golden Dawn. Waite verified for Crowley that the invisible college of occultism mentioned in the introduction to the Book of Black Magic and of Pacts truly existed. Crowley deplored Waite's scholarship and berated him often in the pages of the Equinox and elsewhere. Nevertheless, he acknowledged his debt to Waite, writing, quote, "Waite certainly did start a revival of interest in alchemy, magic, mysticism, and all the rest. That his scholarship was so contemptible, his style so overloaded, and his egomania so outrageous does not kill to the point of extinction the worth of his contribution. If it had not been for Waite, I doubt if, humanly speaking, I should ever have gotten in touch with the Great Order. You may, of course, if you like, go one step further, back to Anna Kingsford and Edward Maitland, but their work, superior as it is to him, lacked one great asset. They gave us no idea of the bulk of medieval literature. To go back further still, HPB, genius as she was far too oriental to produce the necessary effect. Waite occupies a position not unlike that of Samuel Johnson. There is an omnivalence about him which did just what was necessary at the time." End quote. Crowley ultimately found the Golden Dawn and took his neophyte initiation in November 1898. Through 1898 and 1899, he advanced regularly through the ranks of the Golden Dawn until he hit a glass ceiling, owing both to his controversial personal life and to political wrangling between the London Lodge and the Order's head, Samuel Lytle MacGregor Mathers, whom Crowley had befriended. Mathers was the eccentric author of the majority of the Golden Dawn's papers and rituals, and the leading light of the Order. He wrote an impressive array of occult books as well, covering topics that included Kabbalah, tarot, and ceremonial magic. Like his Golden Dawn co-founder Westcott, Mathers belonged to the Masons, the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia, and the Theosophical Society. He also lectured on Kabbalah to the Hermetic Society of Anna Kingsford and Edward Maitland. Being greatly influenced by their feminist, vegetarian, and anti-vivisectionist philosophies, he dedicated his Kabbalah Unveiled to them. Mathers' influence over the Golden Dawn's London Lodge, however, eroded when he moved to France, became increasingly autocratic, called into question the authenticity of the Golden Dawn's foundational cipher manuscript, and demanded that all members sign an oath of allegiance to him. By 1900, these internal politics doomed the London Lodge, and Crowley moved on to independent study. He ultimately founded his own secret society, the Argenteum Astrum, in 1907 with Golden Dawn alumnus George Cecil Jones and new recruit John Frederick Charles Fuller. The influence of the Golden Dawn in this venture cannot be understated, and an appreciation of Crowley's magic truly requires an understanding of the Golden Dawn system. Crowley's frequent references to the Abramelin working and subsequent utilization of the preliminary invocation from the Goetia for this working derive from Mathers' translation of magical texts on these topics. In the following account of a ritual for invisibility that he performed in Mexico City in 1900, he was almost certainly referring to the Golden Dawn's Z2 document, which adapts the structure of its neophyte initiation ritual for numerous other workings, including invisibility. Quote, "I reached a point when my physical reflection in a mirror became faint and flickering. It gave very much the effect of interrupted images of the cinematograph in its early days. But the real secret of invisibility is not concerned with the laws of optics at all. The trick is to prevent people from noticing you when they would normally do so. In this I was quite successful. For example, I was able to take a walk in the street in a golden crown and a scarlet robe without attracting attention." End quote. Similarly, Alan Bennett's ritual for the evocation unto visible appearance of the Great Spirit Taf Tartaraf was published in the Equinox as an exemplar of this applied ritual formula. Crowley himself utilized this model for a ritual to evoke Typhon Seth to visible appearance, quote, in which, by raising the sigil of Typhon to the grade of 1 = 10, he bewitched a certain refractory brother of the order, known as Frater DPAL, who at this time was worrying Frater DDCF by legal proceedings. These Golden Dawn ideas also appear in the discussion of other formulas in magic theory and practice. Crowley owed numerous other debts to the Golden Dawn as well. In 1904, he published, through his own Society for the Propagation of Religious Truth imprint, Mather's translation of The Key of Solomon, although his former mentor was credited only as a dead hand. The lesser and greater banishing rituals of both the pentagram and hexagram in Liber O are those of the Golden Dawn. His tables of correspondences, 777, are likewise based upon Golden Dawn manuscripts given to him by its compiler, Alan Bennett, when Bennett moved from London to Kashmir. Crowley's essay on the Kabbalah draws heavily upon Mather's introduction to the Kabbalah Unveiled. Liber Libri adapts without acknowledgement an older Golden Dawn paper, which is quoted in its neophyte ritual. Quote, remember that unbalanced force is evil, that unbalanced severity is but cruelty and oppression, but that also unbalanced mercy is but weakness which would allow and abet evil. End quote. Liber Israfel, an invocation of the Egyptian god of magic, Thoth, or Tahuti, is likewise drawn from a ritual by his Golden Dawn mentor, Alan Bennett, itself a paraphrase of the 64th chapter of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which was also printed in Volume 8 of the Collectanea Hermetica, titled Egyptian Magic, in 1896. And the Gnostic Mass, discussed later, quotes both the Neophyte and Adeptus Minor rituals. Between 1909 and 1918, Crowley experimented with more flexible and spontaneous ritual structures, frequently uniting an episodic series of rites by a common theme of goal, the whole of which he referred to as a working. Crowley's Rites of Aloysius consisted of one of his earliest and most ambitious forays into this direction. They consisted of 7 dramatic rituals, one for each of the planets in traditional astrology, performed for a paying audience on consecutive Wednesdays at London's Caxton Hall from October 19th to November 30th, 1910. The rites incorporated drama, music, and poetry into their structure, resulting in a mix of theater and religion whose innovativeness in terms of symbolist drama and other theater traditions has only recently been appreciated. Throughout the rites, Crowley leaned on his poetic heroes for content, intermixing works by Charles Swinburne and Paul Verlaine, as well as the Bible, alongside his own oeuvre. Poetry featured prominently in Crowley's experimentation with ritual because he was just as much a poet as he was a magician. Several of his earliest works were issued under the byline, A Gentleman of the University of Cambridge, as homage to Percy Bysshe Shelley, whose 1811 book St. Irvyne, or The Rosicrucian, a Romance, was released by A Gentleman of the University of Oxford. Several years later, Crowley penned the English Review centenary essay on Shelley, signing it Prometheus, after Shelley's Prometheus Unbound. Crowley's future scripted rituals, both published and unpublished, would continue to incorporate music, poetry, and other readings. Subsequent to the Rites of Aloysius, Crowley experimented with even less structured techniques. His Obeldes, Paris, and Amelantra workings employed sex, alcohol, and other intoxicants to induce a state of spiritual ecstasy through which participants identified with deific archetypes or achieved contacts with being from non-physical realms. In these workings, the method of achieving the trance state seemed almost secondary to the dialogue that would result. Crowley's magical practice changed radically when he encountered the sexual occultism of Ordo Templi Orientis in 1912. Under the leadership of Theodore Reuss, OTO evolved out of an aspiring Academia Masonica following the death of its benefactor, Austrian industrialist Karl Kellner. Crowley became the Order's National Grand Master for the United Kingdom in 1912 and would eventually become outer head of the Order. If the Golden Dawn drew its grade system from 18th and 19th century Rosicrucianism, then the OTO structured itself largely upon Freemasonry. So closely was the OTO allied with Masonry that, in his day, Crowley allowed initiates of the Scottish and Memphis Mizraim rites to affiliate to the equivalent degrees in OTO. In fact, Crowley characterized his rituals as distillations of these other rites. Quote, John Yarker saw in 1911 and 1912 that his 33 degrees were themselves unworkable. He gave me a printed copy of the 30 rituals, 4th degree through 33rd degree, the first 3, of course, the craft degrees of Masonry. This devastating volume I took with me on one of my journeys across the Sahara Desert, and from it extracted anything that seemed useful to preserve, and very little there was. The desert was left dry. All of it, such as it is incorporated in the rituals of the OTO. End quote. Yarker knew and approved of his revisions, Crowley contended, but died before he could review the results. Table 6.1, based on a sketch by Crowley, indicates the strong parallels between the OTO degrees and those of the Scottish Rite, as well as those of Yarker's Rite of Memphis and Mizraim. Many established or regular Masonic groups regard the OTO as a form of fringe or irregular or clandestine Masonry. Although initiated into a French Masonic lodge, Crowley believed that his revisions of Yarker's rituals had restored the lost keys of Freemasonry. He later revised the OTO degrees up to 3rd degree to reduce their similarity to their Blue Lodge counterparts in an unsuccessful effort to convert regular Masons to his view. Crowley later distanced himself and the OTO from the craft and criticized what he saw as its endemic problems. Nevertheless, the OTO's rituals beyond 3rd degree retain similarity to their Masonic counterparts. The OTO's chief innovation is found in its upper degree teachings on sexual magic. As shown below, these teachings emerged amid a culture awash with literature on the phallic nature of religion. Crowley devoted the years 1914 to 1919 to experimenting systematically with this technique, as recorded in his Rex de Art Regia diaries. Likewise, in the 1930s, he would also collect his systematic experiments on the medicinal properties of this technique under the title Amrita. These Victorian occult movements had a political agenda, and Crowley's was no exception. Harvey demonstrates how the Martinist movement in France was not merely an occult organization, but exerted political influence as well. In England and the United States, spiritualism provided a mechanism for women to experience empowerment in a disempowering culture, thereby abetting the emerging suffrage and other feminist struggles of the time. Dixon similarly connects theosophy to popular feminist movements. In the United States, meanwhile, sexual mystic Ida Craddock defended the belly dancing of Farida Mazar, aka Little Egypt, at Chicago's 1893 World Columbian Exhibition against federal obscenity laws. This was part of her own crusade for open discourse on equal sexual standards for men and women. To be fair, while feminism constituted a common theme in many spiritualist and occult movements, opinions differed widely on its exact form. For instance, while Theosophist Annie Besant promoted contraceptive rights, Craddock opposed both contraception and abortion. A significant feature of the Theosophical Society, Golden Dawn, and OTO is their break with the common tradition of occult fraternities admitting only men as members. Whereas Freemasons took oaths against admitting women to their ranks, these groups welcomed members of either sex. Indeed, Crowley entrusted to women several important jobs in the OTO, including Grand Secretary General, Layla Waddell, Grand Treasurer General, Vittoria Kremers, and Lodge Master, Mary Davies, a significant gesture in a traditionally male-dominated field.